Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. The Green-Eyed Monster. Beware, for my appetite is hard to satisfy. Once I have sunk my teeth into you, savored your particular taste, it is very hard for me to let go. Think of when you suck juices from the bone, relishing every last drop of roasted meat, or the times when you lick the plate greedily, trusting that no one is watching, sauce dripping from your chin. That is like me, feasting on a most delectable dish. You do not need to be marinated, tenderized, or steeped in spices. I enjoy you quite as you are. Yet it is remarkable, your ability to flavor yourself to my liking. Sometimes sweet, sometimes salty, always spicy hot. Oh yes, the dish you serve might seem slow, cooked, but passion is always the flame that roasts you in the end. Basted in your own juices, I just turn the spit, watching the flames lick higher. Curse me if you will, mock me if you must, but I only gnaw on your bones because you tempt me. And like a dog with a bone, you know I must leap and grab, shaking you in my jaws. Yes, you can say my appetite disgusts you, this frenzied feeding. But I am only such a glutton because you heap my plate ever higher. If I feast, it is only because you throw such rich pickings my way. I grow, fatten myself on your largesse, the bounty of you. Scabs on your knees and scars upon your heart. I lurk in the shadows of your nursery, sniffing out the moment that is ripe for me to bare my teeth and bite. Your baby sister, silhouetted against the nursery window, wreathed in light. Your mother dozes in the rocking chair. The words of a lullaby stream from her mouth, even in sleep. She rocks and croons and kisses the little head. You wonder at this new picture, this piece, so smooth compared to the rough and tumble of time with you. At the door, you watch. Suddenly an intruder in your own home. Knowing the interloper can't enter, mustn't break this peace as then noise. Babies' cries will cut like glass, scenting the air. I smell the musk of your mother's slumber. The baby's sweet new smell, clean of the reek of age and pain, and what you feel when I sink my fangs into you for the first time. You flinch. Of course you do, and try to shake me off. But I clamp down all the harder. Look, I say, shaking you like the rag doll that used to bring you comfort. Look at how she holds her up to your father. Look at how he is enfolding them both in his arms. Where are you in this golden circle? A dark shadow, cast out and forgotten. I bite until I feel your resolve snap, a broken wishbone, and then I know you're a dish I can feast upon my whole life long. I eat my fill and lay you down, chewed, stripped clean, only able to lie there, staring up into my clear green eyes. But sometimes sweet treats can sicken. That first taste, like a candy kiss, can cloy, and soon it is salty foods I crave. I wait my time, hunger growing, growling in the pit of my stomach, louder as the years pass. When I can wait no longer, I prowl to the pitch where you practice every week. Coach is handing out the accolades: best pass, best team player, and the one you covet, man of the match. He walks down the line and stops by your best friend, shaking him by the hand, slapping him on the back. Stealthily, I latch onto your ankle and sink my teeth into your soft, pliable, and welcoming flesh. And with a small whimper, you let me feed. Others go to the locker, get washed and changed, and you stand there, alone. I gourd and guzzle while you watch him and the girl you long to talk to, a dancing moth around his flame. Yes, sometimes the salt you baste yourself in, week after week, game after game, night after night, streaming down your face and soaking your pillow, tastes sweeter than all the candy you can buy. But what is my particular favorite, you ask? Well, as you're a fellow epicure, and you won't let it rest, I'll confess. Steep yourself in spices. Give it all a good cayenne kick. Set my mouth on peppery fire, for I like a blast of heat the best. Passion. Yes, that is the marinade you should steep yourself in. Ladle after ladle of thick, oozing passion. And you, poor, tender fool, that is just what you do. Watching them kiss after he brings the cup home for the team, picturing them hand in hand, kicking up the leaves as the autumn wind lifts their hair and hearts, and as Christmas sweeps in, her snowy mantle wrapped tightly about her, you are roasting in the furnaces of hell. Lying down in the heat you radiate, I feed and feed, growing fatter than the goose and all its trimmings, glistening with fat. I bask in the gluttony you permit me, my green eyes forever trained on you. Indulged, I wax corpulent, rolling with my folds, a Falstaff with fangs. Still you toss me titbits, curled in your bed, picturing your lover, encircled by another's arms. He is faceless, nameless, a fear-made flesh which you feed me from your hand. We are never satiated, even when we walk down the aisle, turn and watch. With predatory eyes, the vision of your lovely bride, regarding you now, more morsel than meat. like a thin scrape of butter on a meager scrap of bread. I feel almost compelled to apologize on the behalf of others. Such a shame the family never comes to fatten you up, or that sporty friend doesn't pop around for a beer. And your wife? Well, perhaps the less said there, the better. At least, you can rely on me, patting my head. I'm your trusty companion, no longer a loathed monster, rather a loyal pet, forever walking at your side. Teddy bear. It's all your fault, you know. Picture it now. I was standing at that sparkling marble countertop, sorting through the mail, when I saw it. A thin envelope, addressed to Joanne Roberts. It sat on my counter for hours while I cleaned up the kitchen, completed an online yoga workout, and took a hot shower. Young's Storage Company, in red letters, as the header to the return address, gave me plenty of info to begin searching online. Final notice, stamped in red across the front, let me know what it was about. Still, I wanted to know the specifics. I must confess, noticed my first night in the house, there weren't any photos of you. Not even a wedding picture. All of the decor was masculine with sharp corners. No color. Somewhere, deep down, I knew he had erased you, but above that knowledge, I had known I was prepared to replace you. I put on my best little red sundress and made myself lunch. A turkey sandwich, side salad, Diet Coke. Did I purposefully knock over my drink? Onto the letter? No. All right, you caught me. I did. Why would my husband have a letter from a storage company addressed to you? It was easy to open the letter, but the only thing inside was a boring notice about you being behind on payments. How can a ghost be behind on payments? I asked him all those questions over dinner. He wrapped me up in kisses, saying, "I'll sort it all out tomorrow, my dear." I didn't want you to be surrounded by her memory. It seemed cruel, but I couldn't part myself entirely from her. She always had a storage unit to house her stuff, so I just kept it going. His beautiful eyes stared at the leftover gravy on his plate, creating a masterpiece with the mashed potatoes. Then he changed the topic and complimented my dress. Did I mention that Jonathan picked all my dresses for me? I remember that day so vividly, so fondly. We had been walking around the mall on our third date after gorging ourselves on soft pretzels and soda pop, when he pulled me into this shop with a pretty little poppy on the sign. We walked past the mini skirts in neon colors, past the intricately woven crop tops, and into the section at the back of the store where dresses hung on racks with signs reading discount. All of the tags had little red stickers on them, marking their new price with the old price in block. Black. Print clearly beneath it, so you truly understood the bargain you were getting. Jonathan fingered through them looked me up and down, and returned to the rack. I did the same, trying to laugh through the pain of explaining my dress size to a new guy. But Jonathan was an old hat at all of this. He was a widower, after all. Mom lost her mind when I told her I met a guy. You know how mothers can be. They just worry. I played it smart, though. I introduced Jonathan into the conversation, all casual, like he was a description of sunny weather. I met a guy, Mom, I said, and her whole body shifted in the salon chair. It was such an abrupt change. Her pedicurist rushed to grab towels and mop up the oily, warm water she had sloshed everywhere. She demanded details. I told her everything I could. That Jonathan was a kind man, that he was incredibly musically talented, that he led the whole church every Sunday at the college mass in song. And, oh yeah, he's a widower. That detail shut her up for a bit. Mom begged me every week to come to church with her and Dad. I always had an excuse why I couldn't manage to go. Of course, the knowledge of Jonathan's existence somehow excused all the excuses. It made it all make sense. It was that final piece of the puzzle. But I could see in her eyes that the word widower frightened her. I watched it wash over her like a wave. It crashed into her heart. It scared her with all of its unspoken realities. An age gap that requires both hands to count. Kids, baggage, survivor's guilt. Would I spend my whole life measuring up to another woman? I assured her that day that I could handle being courted by a widower. Jonathan, in his most charming state, was a master at courtship. After all, he had succeeded in the task at least once. He bought flowers, insisted on meeting Mom and Dad with wine in hand, and when he knelt down on one knee, the whole world held its breath, waiting for my answer. Of course, it was yes. It had to be yes. Be honest. Did you see the signs? We attended the mandatory meetings with our local priest, who already adored Jonathan, perhaps more than me. He even used our story in a Sunday homily about the importance of the vocation of marriage in the church. He said, "I was once approached by a parishioner, our beloved Jonathan, who said he was called to serve God with his voice, and I simply couldn't say no. Just remember, if God calls you to serve, there's nearly no way for me to deny the request." And we all looked to the rafters. I swear Jonathan winked at me. His mother taught him piano. His father taught him to pick a career worth having, which is how he had the gumption to endure college, law school, and life as a first-year associate. All of these milestones belong to the first Mrs. Roberts. Jonathan didn't bring her into the conversation until halfway through our first date. "Listen," he said, as he leaned across the metal table of the cafe. "I've done this before. I am serious about it. I want to get married again. I am called to marriage. I know you're young. I never want you feeling rushed into it. It's a serious commitment." I swear he stole those words right from my father's lips. Yet I smiled. I nodded. I promised I could hold it together, and if I squinted, I could block out the stands of gray in his jet black hair. He laughed when I told him that joke. "Wouldn't you?" Dad takes Jonathan out golfing every weekend, while Mom and I get our nails done. It started out as a habit when we were busy planning the wedding, but it turned into something more for them. They'd come back flushed and happy, giggling, like schoolgirls with secrets. They'd sweep Mom and I up in their arms, and we'd all go out to eat at a fancy restaurant, and Jonathan would pull out his black credit card with that devil-may-care grin before driving me back to the 4-bedroom house I shared with the girls from Bible study. He'd give me a peck on the cheek. I'd press my back up against the cold door and cross out another day on my calendar until graduation. My cap and gown came in a navy blue and gold. My diploma, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, rolled up into a single sheet of fancy parchment, eventually ended up in the back of the closet. But on that day, I knew that the diploma wasn't what I was walking out those auditorium doors with. No, I was walking out with my fiancé, whom my family adored, as my friends crowded me shouting, "5 months until you get your MRS degree. You would have adored our wedding day." It was so perfectly perfect in every way. Jonathan had told me that his first wedding was in mid-June, so we decided to have a winter wedding. October 20th. We chose a Friday so that we could advertise the event as an excuse for a long weekend. He was practiced at catering tasting and planning weather-based backup plans. It was easy to forget why he knew how to do it all. Jonathan's parents, longtime managers in the hospitality industry, ensured we had the very best rates for our guests and a beautiful hall for the reception. It all went to plan. The gorgeous, full Mass with readings Jonathan chose so as not to repeat any from his first wedding. The quick trip to the local hotel where we danced the night away, and the shuttle ride the next morning out to the airport for our honeymoon. I had wanted somewhere warm, but the first Mrs. Roberts insisted on Hawaii, so I settled for a weekend in a Colorado mountain town. We rented a 2-bedroom condo with a huge jetted tub. We spent most of the weekend there, but Jonathan had insisted we step out to do some shopping, to eat a good meal, and drink a good glass of wine. See, that's the thing about Jonathan. When he's got his eyes locked on yours, that enticing bite of elk steak balanced on the edge of his fork, you'd do anything for him. I know I did. Do you know how long it took for Sandy to tell me all about her? The first Mrs. Roberts, my brand spanking new mother-in-law, took me out to lunch, a month after the wedding. We ordered an appetizer and sparkling drinks, and she launched into the story of the ghost who haunted my new husband's heart. I didn't even know your name until that day. It was Joanne. I was told Joanne was very pretty. She was a blonde with a slim waist and easy laugh. She wasn't close to her parents, so she clung to her new in-laws, coming to Sandy for advice every weekend over a glass of wine, to Leonard for help with her car troubles, which seemed to pop up nearly twice a month. That Joanne, she was apparently spectacular. She was the girl next door, literally. Sandy set up play dates on the regular between her son and Joanne when they were in elementary too. Rescue Joanne from her tragic home life. Have I mentioned that the first time I visited Jonathan's parents, they still had the old prom photo of the king and queen proudly displayed on the fireplace mantel? In fact, Sandy walked me over to it before dessert was even served. Don't worry, it was Joanne's favorite, pineapple upside cake. Jonathan told a different story of the first Mrs. Roberts. Did you know he only ever calls you the first? According to him, she was complicated and exhausting and a challenge. He always frowned when he spoke of her and held his chin in his hands, cleared his throat, or took another sip of red wine. So I dropped it. Joanne was always the hot poker of our marriage. The demand came a week after that letter. Jonathan locked eyes with me over coffee, scrambled eggs, and toast. He forbid me from going into the garage, saying, "I can't afford the payments on the storage unit. I've moved a box of her stuff into the garage. I don't want you getting hurt." I nodded and avoided that place like the plague, except last Sunday, when I stood in front of the garage door for 20 minutes before using the spare key we kept hung on the hook, shaped like a moose's antlers, to unlock it. Jonathan's car was gone since he went to the office for the day. His latest trial was scheduled for the next day, so some final details simply needed arranging. He had made me breakfast. There was even a little note bearing his love. I had been perfectly happy eating my meal. It wasn't until I turned on the shower that I even considered the garage. See, I was comfy and cozy in a steamy shower when all the lights went out. I screamed from panic and called out Jonathan's name several times before I vaguely remembered that our breaker panel was in the garage. So I rinsed quickly, dried more quickly, and threw on some leggings before heading outside. Yes, I considered calling Jonathan. Of course I did. I even considered calling my father, or father-in-law, or mother, or mother-in-law, or knocking on the doors of some friendly neighbors. But I figured I was not just a 25-year-old, but a married woman, a wife. If I was ever to become the mother Jonathan needed me to be for our children, I had better be able to switch a breaker. The garage was musty, dusty, gross. Some faint lines from dust remained on our cement floor, where Jonathan always parked his car. The huge freezer he received as a wedding present from my father didn't even whir. I grimaced and examined my scene. There was my bike, the one with the big blue basket that Jonathan had surprised me with for my first birthday with him. There were all of his hunting outfits. He hated when I called them outfits, but what else would I call them? There was his splitting axe, his felling axe, and his hand axe hung up on the wall. There was a tent we bought for our first anniversary. It made me smile, and in the corner were 3 black totes with yellow lids, piled high on against a wall. But I could still make out the silver of the breaker panel, so I marched over and gently shoved them to the side. I could clearly see 2 switches weren't like the others, so I clicked them over. The freezer began to whir to life. I was left with a satisfied grin. You would have been proud. I hope we would have been friends in another life. The big sister, little sister dynamic I always prayed for. When I went to slide the totes back, the top one fell. I was left to clean up old photo albums of Jonathan's childhood. I had seen all of them before, but still paused to stroke the giggling face of Jonathan on his 10th birthday. Around him, balloons decorated the backyard. A huge cake in the shape of a cowboy hat had lit candles. And of course, the present table was overflowing. His little lips puckered as he blew out the candles. I could practically hear the squeals of excited children. I went to pile the tote back up, but decided to slide the 2 remaining totes back into place first, so as not to have the 3rd one fall again. As they were tucked back into place, I noticed the middle one wasn't quite sealed shut, so I went to close it, and found I couldn't. I heard the sound of Jonathan's voice chastising me. If you're gonna do anything, do it right, or don't do it at all. So I took the yellow lid off. Before me were all of Joanne's dresses. I recognized their bright colors from Sandy's photos. I found my hands sifting through them without the full consent of my mind. They felt smooth like water between my fingers, and I held them up to my chest, twirling in a dusty garage all alone. At the bottom of the tote was one final dress and a teddy bear. The dress was white with a blue flower pattern. I grabbed it and grimaced with a pounding heart, noticing the stains of blood in the center of the bust line, the tear where the weapon made its entrance and exit. Any woman who has endured her monthly visitor, knows the color of dried blood. There was no excuse that he could come up with. It wasn't paint or food. It was blood. The bear bore the same markings, and I fell to the garage floor. Jonathan found me hours later. He picked me up, tutting as he went. He placed all of her dresses back in the box, but kept the teddy bear out. He sealed up the tote and helped me into the car. We drove in silence, the only light being from the full moon. Even if I had words, I don't know if my throat could make them. It had gone silent after the screaming and the crying. My exhausted eyes fluttered closed and didn't open until I could tell we had stopped, until I was certain we wouldn't start again, until I felt Jonathan's cool fingers stroking my hot cheek. He wore a sad face, like a clown without makeup. They start out so good, so kind, so loving. They promise to be good, but then they stop. They open letters not addressed to them, ask questions they shouldn't ask. He threw the new dress at me and returned minutes later to take me by one hand. He gave me the teddy for the other one. Our footsteps sounded so loud in the dried-out grass and the silence of the graveyard. Until we arrived. I am the second Mrs. Roberts. I am standing at your grave in my very best black heels and little black dress. My sweaty hands clutch the brown teddy bear I found in an old dusty tote tucked in the corner of our old dusty garage. Jonathan smiles at me for the first time. He pulls out his gun. He leans in close. I close my eyes and taste his kiss one last time. My brain through your brain. Was an optimist, and so, naturally, was the thing that lived in her brain. She awoke one Tuesday morning to discover the change. At first, it was merely a mental echo, barely perceptible. Two indistinguishable minds, one off by a fraction of a second. For Katie's every thought, there was an echo, trailing just behind. Over the day, the new brain drifted further out of sync, and soon she could hear its thoughts, almost identical to hers, but distinct. Eventually, they started talking. "Who are you?" Katie asked. "Katie Singleton," the voice said from inside her head. "That's me." "You're new in there." "I guess so," the voice said. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry." Katie was an over-apologizer too. "What should I call you?" "It's hard to get past Katie," the voice said. "How about Princess Penelope?" Katie asked. It was the name she'd given her imaginary friend when she was an 8-year-old princess junkie. Princess Penelope had filled a void. Playmate, partner in mischief. The sister she never had. The voice was as thrilled as Katie was. It remembered the same childhood. "I love it," she said. "I feel so fabulous." I'm Princess Penelope. Katie wondered what her therapist would have to say about all this, but decided to just go with it. It was nice to have someone like-minded to talk to. They quizzed each other as Katie waited for the morning train, phone held to her ear so onlookers would think there was a real person on the other end of the conversation. Favorite color? Princess Penelope asked. Turquoise, they said together. Turquoise. Movie? Katie asked. Eternal Sunshine, they replied simultaneously. Eternal Sunshine. Guilty pleasure food? Rocky Road, Katie said, as Princess Penelope replied, raw meat. Katie paused, puzzled. It was the first discordant note of their friendship. The train arrived, and they got on. Together, of course. You seem distant, Noah said. It was Sunday morning. They were burrowed under covers, hiding from the daylight. Just like eternal sunshine, Princess Penelope noted. Katie had thought the same thing. She smiled. It was like having a sister, a twin. Noah waited for a response. See, he said, you're somewhere else. Katie had felt disconnected from Noah well before the appearance of her invisible friend. Their relationship was stagnant, all unhealthy patterns. She pretended to laugh at his jokes. He feigned interest in her plans. So, what is it? He seemed more annoyed than concerned. When she moved to the city to be with him, everyone said that she was moving too fast, that it was a bad idea. In time, Katie realized that they were right. She and Noah didn't really know each other, didn't even like each other. Did you meet someone? She traced the line of his jaw with her index finger. Gently. Can't we just be quiet together? She asked. Noah sighed, but pulled her close anyway. I'd love for us to tell him, Princess Penelope said, but he'd never understand. At the market for dish soap, Katie became distracted by the meat aisle. She settled on a pound of ground chuck, leanest she could find, 98% fat-free. It made her feel less guilty about the purchase. It's okay, said Princess Penelope. You know, pregnant women also crave protein. Katie didn't see the relevance, but didn't argue. The woman at checkout eyed her suspiciously. Katie wondered if there was something in their demeanor that called attention to them. Are our eyes twitching? Katie asked Princess Penelope aloud. Excuse me? The woman behind the counter responded. Katie quickly took her bag and went to the alley out back. By the dumpsters, she tore through the plastic wrap and pulled out handfuls of ground beef, squished it between her hands, into her mouth. Her teeth released saturated blood from spongy tissue to drip down her throat. Princess Penelope almost cried inside her, and Katie felt sustained in a way that was new to her, supercharged. Oh, God. She buried her face in the package of meat, gobbling like a starved mutt, sucking down every stray drop of juice until her tongue lapped against the styrofoam backing. Oh, God. What are you? Katie asked. Noah slept in the bedroom. They'd barely spoken that evening. When she came in from work, he told her she looked sick. It was true. She'd examined herself in the bathroom mirror. Cheeks hollowed from lost weight. Bags under her eyes, dark as bruises. Thinning hair, chapped lips, sores. Still, his words hurt her feelings. Princess Penelope's, too. Now Katie sat on the couch, streaming shows she'd already seen. A shield of noise so Noah wouldn't hear her talking. I don't know, Princess Penelope answered. A figment of my imagination? Some part of my brain? I don't think so, Princess Penelope said. I exist. I'm not a stray thought, or a ghost, or anything like that. But what do you look like? I can't tell. I only see my brain. Through your brain, if that makes sense. It does, Katie said. I think there's something. Something you saw, or maybe read. A clue. I'm going to look. Princess Penelope could find memories Katie had lost. It was a wonderful secret shared between them. Her internal friend could call up, with perfect clarity, forgotten birthday parties, replay, word for word, conversations with friends who'd moved away, recover romantic feelings for Noah from those blissful first months when he'd been her lifeline in an unfriendly new city, rescue her mother's smile when she'd been happy, her father's when he'd been alive. Let me know if you figure it out, Katie said. Princess Penelope went quiet while she searched, and Katie felt lonelier than ever. Shows replayed in front of her, and she didn't bother clicking yes when the still watching prompt appeared. She fell asleep, sitting up. No transition. Her brain just clicked off like a light. Wake up, Princess Penelope said. Katie opened her eyes. She stood in the bedroom, facing a wall. What's going on? She asked. Don't be mad, Princess Penelope said. What happened? Katie willed herself to turn from the wall and realized that she couldn't. Princess Penelope was in control. I won't be mad, Katie said. Just show me. In a minute, Princess Penelope said through their mouth. Now she was the one using it. I realized what it was. You saw a video in high school, science class. The zombie wasp. It played in their head. National Geographic. Wasp larvae take over a caterpillar while feeding on it from the inside, directing it to gorge itself until they're ready to eat their way out. You're a wasp? Katie asked. Something smaller, I think, Princess Penelope said. But the same idea. Some kind of bug, maybe. A bug? Crawling around inside her skull. It was too unsettling. Like an itch you could never hope to scratch. I know, said Princess Penelope. It's icky. Again, Katie tried to turn her head. Nothing. The muscles of her body were completely disconnected from her thoughts. Show me what happened, Katie pleaded. Their head tilted down, and Katie saw their hands, covered to elbows in blood. The rest of it. Please. They turned from the wall, and Katie saw it. Bedspread spattered red. Hammer, slathered in gristle, flesh and bone chips, tools, kitchen utensils. Noah disassembled, chest slashed, innard strewn, organs in a pile, some half-eaten, sightless eyes staring, head cracked open, skull emptied. I realized what I was really craving, Princess Penelope said. I didn't want to wake you, but it was delicious. You have no idea. Katie saw everything. Her degraded face in the mirror. Aches all over. New ones every day. The way the light from the bedside lamp now gave her headaches. That sour smell she didn't recognize on her own breath. I'm the caterpillar. I think so, Katie, Princess Penelope said with real sympathy. But I'll go on. Don't know if it helps, but your memories will live in me. Katie felt herself cry, but no tears came. She imagined them falling inwardly, pooling in her steadily shrinking chamber within the brain that had once been hers. I'm so sorry, sweetie. Let's get ice cream. Rocky Road? It was a nice thought. Princess Penelope knew her so well. Do flamethrowers belong in the library? We lose people all the time. It's just the nature of the job. What can you expect from a place full of nooks and crannies? People intentionally go to get lost in. I usually don't worry when I don't see someone for a while. But when it's been days since someone's checked out, it's usually a sign that I need to step in. I'm not doing this alone, thankfully. No librarian is ever truly alone, are they? I have help from the watchers and listeners of the shelves. Thanks to them, it usually doesn't take long to get the scent, if you know what I mean. However, today is one of the rare and unfortunate exceptions when my search has exceeded more than an hour, and an hour is pushing it. I've been searching and asking around for almost 6 hours, scouring shelves and listening for the telltale breathing. The watchers have their quadrants, so it's much like playing hot and cold. Bad news, one says, and my brain shivers in my skull, both from its existence and its statement. They crossed the tape, says the watcher, and I groan. Are you sure? My stomach still drops at the thought, even though I've been doing this a very long time. Long enough that I remember every book on every shelf better than my own child's face. But knowing a poor soul lost themselves beyond the tape, I grieve for them. The watcher doesn't speak, but generates an affirmative sensation. That means I have to backtrack to my desk for supplies. I thank them, asking that they send word ahead of my arrival. It's been a while since I've had to go past the tape, which means it's been a while since I entered the broom closet. The helmet is dusty. It looks almost like it's from one of those old-fashioned scuba diving suits. It's not nearly so heavy, though. There's a bright lamp affixed to the front just above the visor, but it's as much of a hindrance as a help. While most of the time, Those beyond the tape know not to bother me. Some still get bored enough to try. And the lamp acts like a beacon. I don't blame them. It's what prisoners do. Find the weakest among them and test their mettle. I've got a sack full of unperishables, tinctures, aspirin, and a compass. Not like the kind you're used to, but would take too long to explain. And time is of the essence, so I'll let your imagination handle it from here. I sling the sack across my body and fasten my waist with a utility belt that would make a trust fund bat character with abandonment issues jealous. It's got floss, lighters, matches, and a few more tools that don't exist outside of the library. The last thing I grab is the flamethrower. This is where I should be very transparent with you. I'm not actually the librarian. I'm the librarian's assistant. I know, isn't that just your luck, right? Not to worry. I'm very good at using this thing, and it does the job nicely. Whatever job I may deem necessary at any particular moment. But the head librarian doesn't really need much of anything to ward off what lingers here. I don't know exactly where he is at the moment, nor do I want to know. If this were a real pickle, I would summon him. But while a rare occasion, it's not unusual in the scope of 1,000 years. After all, no one comes here without the intention, whether it's conscious or subconscious, to get lost. It's the nature of this place. But you know that, don't you? It's why you're here, after all. It doesn't take me long to find the tape, which is fortuitous. Sometimes it moves around, but the watchers and listeners kept a beat on it this time, so as to direct me. Yes, it is really dark. Yes, it's literal tape. Hazard tape. But that's almost like a beacon to the adventurous, isn't it? I think the library knows that. It's greedy, but it's also quite discerning in taste. In some circles, that means that I should extend congratulations to you. In others, I offer my sincerest sympathy. I hear my name and ignore it as I crawl through the crisscross of reflective strips. The tape moves not at random, by the way. It genuinely serves as a warning, whether it's gatekeeping sections currently under construction, in repair, or missing. I try not to, but I think that last one has something to do with where the head librarian went. Don't worry about it. My name is not important, so ineffectual that I've forgotten. I hear my name again as I begrudgingly turn on the lamp. Not a lot of help, just enough light to ensure I don't trip over anything or disturb the shelves. Many sleep here. I send off a warning shot from the flamethrower, showing I carry more light than just atop my appetizing head. The flash of flames sends things slithering. But most of those this close to the tape have never been very convicted by nature, so I'm not concerned. There are more listeners and less watchers past the tape, for obvious reasons. Thankfully, they say I don't have to go too far. I look down at the telling clicking sound to see rocks rolling. Some as big as my foot, and some as small as the tip of my thumb. The smaller ones move more easily, but all are rolling as if pulled toward a central point. I don't even need the compass, but I glance down at it one more time before stuffing it back into the sack. While I don't have to go too far, things are relative here. 10 steps may be 10,000. And so, even after only a few moments of exploring, I feel acute pressure jamming into my temples. My heart feels like it's being squeezed, and my vision blurs. My fingers tingle by the time I'm able to shake the aspirin into my mouth. I chew it, ignoring the sound of my name, my true name, the one only I can hear. You'll hear your own as well, if you stay here long enough. My vision clears, which just means the dark looks sharper, and I sweep another warning arc from the flamethrower for good measure. I do this as much because I love the sound as for protection. I also appreciate the warmth. It gets cold here, but in a strange way, which shouldn't surprise you at this point. It's cold, like how the first signs of spring show in the early morning dew that's only just melted. I can smell and taste the sweat on my upper lip. And it's cold, and then I hear it. A few or 1,000 steps later, the breathing sound I've been listening for. The pace of the rocks quickens, and my head is turned down, so the helmet light prevents me from tripping over or impeding their journey. A famous author once said, "All things serve the beam." And that's as true in this world as it is in the others. Except this beam, this beacon, is attached to our lost visitor. I can only hear the rocks, mumblings, and the breathing sound now. The smell is so musty and thick, like the air is full of sweat and dust, like I've stuck my head out the window during a heavily falling rain. If I think hard enough about it, soon I'll be drenched, so I don't. While the rocks are almost the perfect tell, and the listeners too corroborates the evidence, you can never be too sure. Only light can be sure. I take a match from the tiny box, snap it to life, and then blow it out. Tiny smoke tendrils curl and waft until they also follow the same flow as the rocks. Excellent. We've not been led astray. A few or 1,000 more steps, and the rocks are gathering down an aisle where the breathing is more like wheezing, like the desperate struggle to take in. Lo and behold, we found them. Poor thing. Judging by the state of her, she got lost early. She's likely been here for most of the day. The book covers her face, consuming her head like a kid on a particularly large popsicle. The pages flutter gently against her too white jaw. The papery quality of her skin and the wanting muscle mass show how little time was on our side. Not a moment to waste. I grab the book by the edges of both back and front covers. It's got most of her head inside at this point, Just her earlobes, hair, and edge of her jaw peek out from beneath the pages I now grip firmly. The wheezing turns into a moan that turns into a sob. Now, I say, and test the hold the book has on its victim. It's snug, too snug to yank like a leech. I need to treat it like a tick, making sure to get the head out. None of these are intended as puns, but it just happens after being surrounded by books and prose for so long. I draw one of the tiny vials strapped in my utility belt and pull the cork out. It smells like nothing to me, but I see the reaction immediately. Our half-consumed explorer moves a bit, her fingers mostly, and I hear a second, tinier moan beneath that of the books. I pour a small amount of the substance into the palm of my hand, and I smooth it gently down the spine of the book. It wails again, and so does the girl, both full of sorrow and reluctance. I feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, so I turn at the hip, cock the flamethrower, and send off a very intentionally long tail of flames. When the feeling subsides, I shrug the weapon back over my shoulder. I use the backs of 2 knuckles to knock gently on the book cover. It's time to come back now. My apologies, I say, and I mean it. The book and the girl moan again, more hollowly, and I can feel the seal, the bond, splitting like a seam. I grip the book again, because these two are stubborn and have to pry them apart. The color and mass return beneath her skin, and though her eyes are open, they can't see anything. She'll be like that for a while. It's normal. She'll recover. I pour the remaining contents of the bottle down the part of her frazzled blonde hair. Tears fill the empty eyes and drip down her face. Her mouth presses into a thin white line and grimaces so intensely that the flesh folds in multiple layers at the corners of her mouth. Great pain. Even after 1,000 years, I still can't help but feel sorry. So I pull her burning head under my chin and rub circles into her back. I'm sorry, dear. I know you've been told otherwise, but this place is a prison, and that isn't your story. Yours is still being written, and the one which made you pretty promises is lying and jealous. One day, you, if the world is cruel, may yet have a place here, but it's not today. So let's go have a cup of tea, I tell her, as I've told many like her. I've gotten better at it over the years. I used to have to fight with them. Often, I'd give up and just keep them safe until the head librarian got back to talk them down. She finally lets out a weak, wheezing breath. I take advantage of the broken seam of her lips and pour a tincture down her throat. I don't even have to look anymore. I can just feel the specific melodies that make each tincture different. It helps that the one I need usually sings a bit louder as a courtesy. and it'll purr like a cat when I've touched my fingers to it. She chokes a bit, but her eyes start to clear. Good enough for now. The back of my neck has another sudden influx of goosebumps. We've overstayed our welcome. It's time to go. I put the book back on the shelf. I don't scold it, just allow its ache and frustration flow through me. I apologize, but there's no comfort I can give. My words and compassion are meaningless. I've noted the volume and will tell the head librarian. They might be able to soothe it back to sleep. I tap the metal bauble around my neck, and we're back at my desk. I drape the girl onto a nearby love seat that's seen better days, starting the kettle before heading to the broom closet to stash the emergency kit. She'll be fine. People like her, and you, always are. This place was made to help the wanderers and recklessly imaginative. Those who can't wrap their heads around the world the way it is, and can see the truth of magic between heartbeats and heartbreaks. And people like me and the head librarian, when they so choose to grace us with their presence, keep the place orderly and open for you. And we're here to help guide you back on track if you lose inspiration for your own story. It's the nature of the job, the library itself. What else can you expect from a place full of nooks and crannies that people choose to get lost in? The doctor. Don't touch me. Keep your distance. I've heard that every day now for 9 months. Doesn't make things easy when you're the town's GP. First, it was the fires. Then it was the virus. Everything has turned to shit in Maui after the president was re-elected. Okay, he probably has nothing to do with it. But we need to blame someone, don't we? I put on my PP bunny suit and wait at the Kihei Pier for the boat to arrive. Second boat this month, the sergeant says. Locked and loaded, I say, showing him my assault rifle and giving him a hint of a salute, even though military ranks no longer exist. Good stance, Doc. Besides being able to hold a rifle, I'm here to do spotting. Being the town's GP, people think I'm the best person at detecting who has been infected. What I don't tell those people is that the virus is invisible, and we don't have any medical supplies or way to detect it. And since we've run out of insulin last month, I've lost much of the feeling in my fingers. And my toes? We've lost our connection weeks ago. One day at a time. I need to carry on. I have a duty to my patients. The boat nears the dock. The men on board are pointing guns back at us. It makes sense. They are as suspicious of us as we are of them. They don't know whether the virus has taken hold here. They look nervous. That's a good sign. I hold my numb finger well away from the trigger of my AR-15. When the takeover began, it was easy to spot them. The freelancers. The first thing they lost was self-care. All they did was work. They spent no time looking in the mirror. All they wanted to do was to book billable hours. We normal people used to work 8 hours a day, they could work 20. But lately, the gig guru's AI has injected more of a human touch into the virus, leaving just enough human instinct for them to fly under the radar. Unless one is very, very discerning. A man on the front of the incoming boat shouts, "Honolulu Medical Supply Run, Captain Johnson from Tripler AMC." The sergeant gives a proper military salute to the boat. "Sergeant Jaworski, are we good to dock, Sergeant?" "All good here, Captain." The sergeant nods and signals the others to tie up the incoming boat. A moment later, Captain Johnson jumps off. I study his face closely. Well-defined cheekbones. We've all on a starvation diet these days. He notices my stare. "Hey, chill out. We're friendlies." I keep my distance. Gig Guru's virus is so large, it doesn't spread easily. It can't travel through the air without its high molecular weight making it drop to the ground. How it infects people, no one is exactly sure. Every story that changes history begins with a spark. An event so small and insignificant, no one noticed it at the time. Hitler giving his first speech on a corner in Vienna. The CIA attaching a missile to a drone in Afghanistan in 2002. The AI apocalypse started with something even smaller. In 2020, Gig Guru, a freelance company, sent health supplements to its workforce. They saw the programmers who received free yerba mate pills booked 12% more hours. The creatives who received green tea extract had higher customer satisfaction scores. It worked so well, Gig Guru hired data scientists to expand their biohealth program. The scientists expanded the system to program to giving freelancers suggestions on how to receive ADHD prescriptions. The next year, they requested their DNA samples. "We've been vaccinated," Captain Johnson says. "The military lab in Honolulu has come up with new tech. We're here to bring it to you." The captain holds out his hand for a handshake. I instinctively back off. "Why didn't you let us know about this over the radio?" the sergeant asks. "Operational secrecy." The sergeant nods. Apparently, this makes sense to him. The captain and his men haul crates of medical equipment off the boat. They take over our abandoned ice cream parlor at the end of the pier. Someone yanks the starting cord on the generator they brought. The lights turn on. They begin plugging in all the medical equipment. The rumble of the generator and the displays lighting up signals, modern civilization. Something we are all longing for. I feel it's my duty to safeguard the best interest of my patients. What if Gig Gugu alters the virus? I ask the captain. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I look to the sergeant for his opinion. The sergeant looks uneasy, but he defers to the captain. The scale of the military presence in Honolulu is hundreds of times greater than ours. And what do we have to lose? "I'll go first," the sergeant says. He leads from the front. I stand back, and him receive a series of medical checks. They take a vial out of a freezer box and give him an injection in the shoulder. "Don't feel a thing," he says with a big grin. The one he gives us when we are all worried about something. Everyone in our community receives their injection before me. I watch them closely for side effects. I can give aid if needed. Finally, it's my turn, and I sit down. Captain Johnson takes my blood pressure and oxygen levels with the jury-rigged equipment. I don't recognize some of the machines that they've put together. Your blood pressure is running a bit high, but everything else is normal. How have you been feeling lately? A little off, but hanging in there. I feel my ribs poking out from my Aloha shirt. Any symptoms? He asks. I stare at my toes. The ones I can't feel. It wouldn't help to complain about diabetes right now, so I say nothing. I'll ask later if they have any insulin on Honolulu. All good, I say. This man is a great patient. The captain looks at all his equipment and winks at his crew in the room. I stand up from my chair, and he gives me a hug. I want to shed a tear, as I haven't been hugged by anyone for years. I think of my daughter and how much I miss her. She's in California. It's probably too late, but I think there's still hope. Thank you for your service, Doctor, the captain says. He hugs me even tighter, his arms almost crushing me. Someone comes up close behind me. I feel a sting in my buttocks. He's the only one infected, I hear him say, before everything goes dark. Bedtime for Muriel. Cocoa, warm, not scalding, with pink marshmallows. And use a mug this time. I don't need to lose any more porcelain by knocking it off the table in the middle of the night. Use your brain, for fuck's sake. Yes, Muriel, said Angela, nodding as she tucked the hummingbird motif duvet around the octogenarian's neck. I'll be right back. You just get comfy and listen to Barry. Listen to Barry, the old woman with the silver hair scoffed, shuffling under the covers as if in criticism of the way she'd been positioned. Why do I have to listen to Barry? He's a wanker. Why do you always play him? Because you love Barry Manilow, Angela replied, making sure the personal alarm on Muriel McCandless's bedside table was in reach. And he's the only one who gets you to sleep. Don't tell me I'm wrong. We've experimented with Neil and Lionel, but you always end up awake all night. We're not doing that again. Barry fucking Manilow, said Muriel, flopping her arms against the mattress like a petulant child. Sounds like a cat being strangled. Absolute wanker. Angela couldn't suppress a giggle as she made her way across to the door, pausing to retrieve the tray laden with pill bottles and blister packs of various medications from the dresser beside it. And why is that horrible painting still on my wall? I told you, I don't like it. It gives me nightmares. For fuck's sake, put it in the bin. I did put it in the bin, Angela said, pausing by the threshold to straighten said picture with her free hand. 10 times. And you always tell me to put it back because it's your anchor, whatever that means. It's a fine painting anyway, one of your best. I have no idea what it is, but those slabs of overlapping color really do jump off the canvas. It's horrendous. I was stoned when I did it, like all the rest, and the idiot sheep lap them up. Pretentious twats with more money than sense, putting value on my neuroses. So true, Angela nodded, leaving the room. But at least they made you a fortune. Now, don't nod off before I come back with your cocoa. She said the same thing every night, winking at the lady of the house, whose head propped up on 2 Hungarian goose-down pillows was glaring daggers. I might have to drink it myself. Don't you dare touch my butler's chocolate, young lady, Muriel called as she pulled the door shut. It's Cadbury's we get for you, and you better fucking drink it. With the thick slab of mahogany secured in the doorframe, Muriel's shrill voice faded, and Angela's giggle turned to a chuckle as she made her way downstairs. Miserable Muriel. Moaning Muriel. Malicious Muriel. But also her Muriel, and despite her contrariness, she loved her. Nobody could put up with her for long. Not her husband, who she said passed away to escape her. Not her kids, who she said found careers in faraway countries to avoid having to visit. Which was good for Angela, who was used to dealing with foul-mouthed, cantankerous old biddies, having looked after her mother for years. It meant she got the gig of a lifetime as a live-in nurse and maid to a world-renowned, reclusive, abstract artist, free food and board, the run of a manor on private land in Wexford, surrounded by nature. What more could a 30-year-old carer of the elderly, sick of working endless shifts in soulless hospitals, and keen to fulfill her ambition of providing one-on-one personal caregiving, ask for, other than a cup of Butler's chocolate before bed? Reaching the bottom of the stairs and turning towards the kitchen, she fished her phone from her pocket to check the notification she'd felt buzz in some minutes before. WhatsApp from Freddie. I'm here. Is the cranky old bitch asleep yet? Shaking her head, Angela used her thumb to type. Not a bitch. Eccentric. And no, not yet. Making her chocolate. Out soon. Hope the pizza's ordered. Phone back in pocket. She made her way down a hall lined with photos, featuring everything but family, friends, and Muriel's art. Because she had no friends, hated her family, and her art terrified her. Shouldering her way through another thick door into the kitchen. The back door stood open, and it was freezing. The chill October temperatures having made themselves at home. What the hell? Said Angela, placing the tray on the marble-topped kitchen island. Freddie, I told you, you can't come into the main house. You'll get me fired. She couldn't see Freddie, but she knew she was there because the door had definitely been shut, and she was the only other person with access to the property. Something Muriel had reluctantly agreed to, on the proviso that her boyfriend only came over between 9 and 10 on weekends. Rules, of course, were made to be broken, and it was now 9:30 on Wednesday, with a night of pizza, beer, and Love Island catch-ups to look forward to. And were you raised in a barn? God, Freddie, close the door at least. As she hurried to shut out the cold, she caught a glimpse of movement by the fireplace and tensed herself, waiting for Frederica to wrap her arms around her and lift her off the floor, spin her around, and kiss her. She giggled in anticipation. Just be quiet, okay? Her music's on, but I swear she has a sixth sense. She always seems to know when. Raquel. The odd-sounding words were guttural, rasping, nails on chalkboard jarring. And Angela felt her blood run cold as the door clicked into place, and she smelt something rotten. Freddie? She knew it wasn't Freddie, but she turned anyway, to stare in horror at the bulbous, slug-skinned thing lurching towards her. A dozen yellow eyes in a mantis-like head, blood dribbling from fleshy mandibles as it swung one of many barb-covered tentacles at her head, slamming her hard to the floor. Muriel, because you like Barry Manilow. Sarcastic bitch. I do in my shite. Muriel had thrown off her duvet and swung her spindly legs off the mattress, slipped her bony feet into fluffy slippers, and wobbled to the dresser, where her phone was plugged in to charge, and from which the odious lyrics of Copacabana were oozing. Awful, Muriel spat, snatching up the phone to swipe at its screen with a withered finger. Fucking awful. How do I get George on this thing? Her efforts to navigate the Spotify home screen were interrupted when her eyes went to the canvas over the dresser, causing her to shiver and moan. Awful, she said again, dropping the phone as Barry sang. She lost her youth, and she lost her Tony. Now she's lost her mind. Told her to put it in the bin. Stupid bitch never listens. I've a mind to send her packing. Her and that long-haired boyfriend of hers. Dresses like a girl. Whatever happened to... She'd tugged the painting off the wall, shuffled to the door, pulled it open, and was about to fling the canvas out when she heard something stumble on the stairs, but only after being staggered by the smell of rotten fruit or vegetables, a smell that activated in her head a buried memory, like the image on the canvas which suddenly flared to life in her mind's eye. She was led by the hand from the tent in the forest to the light in the night by a shadow, looking back for help, seeing her father in his bag by the campfire, shouting, "Daddy, we're not alone." To no response, shivering in her nightdress, pine needles stabbing her bare feet. When she looked forward again, in response to the shadow telling her its name, she was entering the light and finding it filled with an indescribable array of frightening objects, machines and devices, glowing in bright colors. A chair, which she was placed into, to be pushed towards a hulking monster that reached dozens of wriggling tentacles towards her, making her scream. Arnold? She surprised herself by muttering, as her knees gave out, and she collapsed, landing with her head outside her door, turned towards the source of the smell, towards the glistening black thing that was lurching up the stairs on lumpy legs, like a bipedal squid out of water, black as tar, drooling blood, tentacles whipping in the air. "Arnold," she said again, though she didn't know why, just that the name had entered her head when she recognized the odor, an odor she'd smelled only once in her life and forgotten, an odor she remembered now as memories of that night in June 41 exploded in her mind like Luftwaffe bombs. The night she wandered off during a camping trip with her family and got lost in the woods for 3 days. Unknown colors, unidentifiable shapes, morphing, mutating, surging around her like waves, and amongst them, yellow eyes, drooling pincers, tentacles in her mouth, wriggling deep, filling her throat. "Are you Arnold?" Muriel asked, pushing herself up to kneeling, watching the monster approach. "Did you take me away?" The terrifying beast of many tentacles reached the top of the stairs, brought its insectile head level with hers, narrowed its sulfur yellow eyes. Words that sounded like crotchet, verakel came from its blood-smeared mandibles, and Muriel straightened in defiance, remembering the sounds, remembering the smell, remembering it. "Did you take me?" she demanded, as a long-sought understanding of why she hurt the way she hurt, and dreamt the things she dreamt, and channeled the visions she was plagued with finally materialized. "You filthy alien pervert!" The creature drew itself up to full height, spread its pincers wide, and issued an ear-splitting shriek that sprayed droplets of blood on Muriel's face. "You stole my life!" The fiery 87-year-old spat, struggling to her feet as the monster hissed. "You filled me with hate and anger. Tusak verakel," it said, stepping closer, swinging its tentacles back to Muriel. It was Angela, appearing on the monster's back, wrapping her arms around its neck, her face a mask of horror, bloody and torn, flap of skin dangling from one cheek, lips burst, eyes swollen, glaring. "One," she forced past mangled tongue. "Call Porice." The alien monster thing shrieked and thrashed and slammed itself into the wall, reaching up and back, coiling tentacles around Angela's head. Muriel, snapped from the fugue-like state she'd drifted into by Angela's appearance, felt delayed panic race through her, and turned, tottered back into her room, swung the door shut, and reached for her phone, still connected to its charging cable on the dresser. "I've been alive forever," Barry crooned, "and I wrote the very first song For the second time in as many minutes, the old lady's trembling hands gathered up the phone, then dropped it again as the door burst open. An airborne, headless Angela flying through, slamming into Muriel and knocking them both to the floor. Stupid bitch, she thought, propping herself up on her elbows, feeling a heavy weight on her legs, knowing without looking it was Angela. Fat lot of good she was. Should have got rid of her ages ago. Probably let that bastard get in while she was canoodling with... Wait, Arnold? Was that really Arnold? I remember him taking my hand while I peed. Before she could finish the thought, the window over her bed exploded, and millions of shards of razor-sharp glass filled the room, lacerating her arms, legs, and face. Arnold. When the alert came through, he was 18 parsecs away on Vestron 7, helping to quell an uprising organized by the anarchic Micropian Party in advance of upcoming elections. And he cursed himself for falling for the ploy, although he'd been transferred to the president's personal security division. The rebel leader, Flamethrowers, knew he wouldn't be able to resist returning to his homeworld to help the ground troops subdue the dissidents. He had knowledge of the land that would prove invaluable to their efforts, so it wasn't a stretch to predict what he would do when he heard of the unrest. Anti-libertarian, Micropian scum tarnishing his beautiful Vestropolis. Unthinkable. Arnold Edibold couldn't stand by while such a violation occurred, and he hadn't. But by abandoning his post to rejoin his regiment, he'd left his asset unguarded and given Flamethrowers an opportunity to damage Turanian unity. He would be banished to the frozen wastes for such an indiscretion. So as soon as he received news of the security breach from the capital, he knew what machinations were afoot and commandeered a starhopper to take him from Vestron to Earth. A trip through the inner cosmos that normally took several hours, but he accomplished in one as he raced to avert disaster, a feat he was sure he had failed when he teleported down to the grounds of the manor and discovered the remains of a human female scattered across the lawn. "I'm too late," was his first thought. "We will lose the elections. The anarchists will seize power. The Turanian nation will fall, and I will live out my days on an ice-cold rock near Cetron, where his second, third, fourth, and fifth." Then he heard sounds of commotion from a room on the second floor and realized he still had a chance. He raced to the wall, used his tentacles to climb it, eyes narrowing into slits as he prepared for battle, reaching the window and smashing through into the sleeping quarters of the one he'd sworn to protect. Muriel McCandless, now much older than she'd been when he left his post 2 days before. 14 years older, to be precise. She was on the floor, under a corpse, covering her head with twig-like arms as glass rained down around her. Arnold landed on a pink platform under the window as the assassin pounced into the room, placed a foot on the small of Muriel's back, snaked its tentacles down towards her head. It glared at him while it coiled its limbs around her neck. "Cratchit, Verakel," it snarled, and Arnold looked on in defeat, knowing he couldn't do anything before the rebel ripped the head off the human. They'd hacked the Capitol's data files. They'd found who they were looking for. They'd determined her location and knew they had time to take her out. They'd put a plan in motion, and it had worked. They were seconds away from causing an election upset. Unless the president would not be happy. But there was only one thing he could do. "Daddy, we're not alone," he said in perfect English, mimicking the voice of the 5-year-old girl in the woods. The only thing she'd said beyond screaming when he took her from her family 2 weeks before. The words they'd recorded and used, buried in her subconscious as a trigger to put her mind in a coma when needed. Beneath the rebel's foot, Muriel's body contorted, spine snapping, head twisting, neck breaking, eyes staring up at Arnold. Fuck you, Arnold," she said. "You evil bastard." Her final word trailed off as her head exploded, and from the hole in her neck came Vera Kell, howling as she grew from shrunken embryo to full-size adult in a matter of moments. The rebel fell back, tentacles around the emerging president, becoming entangled with hers as they grew from her torso. It was trapped, and it hissed, and it roared, watching Vera Kell's head fully form, her eyes blink open and stare. It took her a second to get her bearings, but once she had, she didn't wait, opening a second vertical mouth in her throat and spraying a jet of corrosive acid from her guts, an act only females of the Turanian race could perform, an act Arnold could not watch. He stared at his feet while the anarchist screamed at the unstable pink slab he was standing on, and the earthbird illustrated puffy material, balled up at its end. Pretty, he thought. Looks soft. Inviting. Why don't we have such niceties on Arnold, the president said, snapping him to attention and bringing his gaze back up, avoiding the steaming mass of goo by the door. Yes, ma'am? What transpired today? Why the intrusion? Anarchists, ma'am. Pleekvar hacked the Capitol's databanks, found out you were vacationing on Earth in a human host with me watching over. Saw it as a chance to take you out of the running for re-election. Initiated an uprising on Vol.3 to lure me away. Sadly, I fell for it. Thought they could use a local to help. Then he sent someone to eliminate you. I see. But you found out? Capital agents got wind of it and alerted me. I returned at once, but too late to do anything other than wake you. I apologize, ma'am. Vera Kell grunted, looking around the room. Fuck, she said, in her characteristic, crude way. Ma'am, couldn't even get 2 shitting weeks to myself before starting on the campaign trail. This was a good life, too. Fun. But interrupted right before the end. What bullshit. Human passings are the best fucking bits. Sorry, ma'am. Don't apologize. I'm alive, aren't I? Thanks to you. Did you say that asshole Flamethrowers orchestrated a rebellion on your homeworld? Yes, ma'am. Is it quelled? No, ma'am. I had to leave before... Then what are we fucking waiting for? You have a hopper, I presume? Let's get back to it. I'm in the mood for melting more anarchists. And then I'm going to kick the living shit out of Flamethrowers. And so, exiting a crime scene the likes of which had never before been witnessed, Vera Kell and Untold left Manilow behind, singing, "We'll just go on burning bright somewhere in the night." The Sculptor of Lyon. Jacques heard someone enter his 5th-floor studio, heard the heavy groan of the old wood door, heard the tired thing thunder back into place, slamming with a finality that said no more. And it was the only thing that stopped him from pitching forward from his balcony into the street below. Rich heels snapped against the scuffed parquet floor, and the boards underneath strained against the weight of every step the stranger took. "Hello?" came a man's voice. Jacques relit his cigarette for the 4th time and looked out over Lyon. His studio was the top floor of a tower, sitting in the crook of the Saône, and he had a lovely view of the Pont de la Feuille. They still called it the New Bridge, even though it had been reconstructed nearly a decade ago, in 1841. He could just see one of his lions from this angle, a stoic beast carved of marble, watching over the people of the city as they crossed the bridge. One of his first commissions. "Hello?" came the man's voice again. It was curious but calm, familiar but unrecognizable. A voice that tugged at his memories and hid at the corner of his eye. Jacques huffed. If he should fall from his balcony, he'd tumble 5 floors and strike the cobble below. With luck, head first. But it would leave a mess for his landlady. And besides, he had company. Ah, but the Pont de la Feuille. If he snuck out at night, he might throw himself to the mercy of the Saône and let it wash away the grayness of his life. "Hello? Jacques? Out here." He flicked the last of his cigarette over the railing. On the balcony, the steps drew close, and only once Jacques felt the presence of another beside him did he turn. And Jacques startled. Beside him stood a man dressed head to toe in rich reds and blacks, accented with gold buttons and chains and jewelry. His boots were buckled with gold. His hands were covered in black satin gloves, and upon his head sat a broad-rimmed hat with a white feather in the band. The clothes screamed wealth, if not style, though perhaps they whispered a style to come. Monsieur Desrosiers. Jacques cleared his throat. Pardon me, sir, but I was not expecting you. No matter. Monsieur Desrosiers smiled and patted Jacques on the shoulder. I've come to take a look on my commission. Something cold shifted in Jacques' bowels. The commission. It was the one thing he didn't want to think about, and the one thing he couldn't stop thinking about. It was beautiful. It was hideous. And for better and worse, it was the only thing that kept him alive. If it hadn't been for the chance encounter with Monsieur Desrosiers 3 months ago, on a moonless, foggy night, when Jacques planned to get well drunk and then to go looking for trouble, whether in the dark alleys of Lyon, or in the waters of the Saône, or by means of the loaded pistol he kept in his pocket, he might finally have been done with it all. But when they ran into each other just outside Fournier's, Monsieur Desrosiers insisted they enter the bar and share wine. And when Jacques told him of his misery, of his heartache, of giving up, Monsieur Desrosiers insisted further. I can't do it anymore, Jacques said. Every breath I draw is torture. All I want is to hold her again, to feel her skin against mine. There's no greater pain than that of the heart, said Monsieur Desrosiers. But this is the well from which we draw art. Tell me, what do you intend to do with the piece? I don't know. I will smash it. Impossible, Monsieur Desrosiers said. There was no alarm in his voice, just a statement of fact. I'll not hear another word. I'm commissioning you to finish it. And the price he offered, coupled with the wine, was not something Jacques could refuse. Jacques lit another cigarette. This way, sir. He took his patron to his workshop, a dusty place filled with statuettes, busts, blocks of various stones, and wooden frames, a place dominated by a column of a man's height, covered by a white cloth that promised severe edges. A stool sat before it, and hammers and chisels littered the floor, scattered like afterthoughts. Show me, said Monsieur Desrosiers, circling the covered statue. It's not finished. It cannot possibly be finished. Art never is. Reveal it. It's grotesque. A cruel mockery. Impossible. Your hands are magical. They sing to the stone. Come, do not keep me waiting. Jacques tarried only a moment longer, and then listlessly he pulled at the cloth. There was a radiant Gaia. Marvelous, said Monsieur Desrosiers. She's simply magnificent. He touched the cold marble, placed his hands on the midriff, ran his palm up the perfectly smooth abdomen, cupped an ice-cold breast. Jacques felt his throat harden. Said Monsieur Desrosiers, his thumb and forefinger cradling a nipple. Such attention to detail. So like the real thing. His hand slid to the abdomen again, and then began sliding lower, following her contours, following the map of her muscles and flesh. Lower, ever lower. Sir. Jacques grabbed the other's hand. Sir, please, it's unfinished, very delicate. Monsieur de Rosier locked eyes with him for just a moment, but then a wide grin bloomed on his face. Of course, of course. How boorish of me to interfere with the genesis of art. But I tell you, you have made an exquisite piece here. It's so like life. Jacques felt the cold in his guts roil. He beheld the work that consumed him, the statue of Camille, the torso of Camille, rather. She stood on the stumps of her hips, and she had no arms. Neither had he been able to bring himself to carving her head, her precious face. Not yet. Not ever, perhaps, but lifelike? Yes, Jacques had to admit that was true. He knew the map of her. His fingers had traced her every path, and he'd drunk deeply of her, gotten lost in her shallows. He couldn't count the nights they'd spent in soft embrace, or the fervent daylight moments they'd stolen together. There was no greater love, he knew, and she was forevermore his heart. It was Monsieur de Rosier that had introduced them. Monsieur de Rosier, his enigmatic patron, the man who discovered Jacques, who secured his first commissions and helped him build a name for himself. The man convinced of magic hands, convinced that there was nothing they could not sculpt. The man who knew very well what he was doing when he brought Jacques and Camille together, and then left them alone. Ah, but this cold, dead stone. It merely looked like Camille once. Looked like her before her death, before her murder. It was hard and unyielding, and had none of the vibrant warmth of the real thing, of his muse. This was a horrid effigy, and no more. You have outdone yourself, Monsieur de Rosier said. Truly, your work honors my niece. It's unfinished, Jacques whispered. I have a hunch it soon will be. I've a sense for these things, as you know. No magic hands myself, but a sense about art, yes. Now come, we will celebrate your progress and looming breakthrough. Monsieur de Rosier brought libations. They started with wine and moved on to absinthe, and all the while, Monsieur des Rosier talked about his views on art, and how through it, he firmly believed, man could pierce the veil through force of will alone, he said, to create, like God. Jacques' vision swam, but Monsieur de Rosier seemed cogent, no matter how much he downed. But the conditions must be right. We must truly want it, as only the empty heart of the artist wants. Soon, Monsieur de Rosier said, you are my most prized sculptor in all of my stables. Soon you will prevail. I don't doubt it. Now, I leave you to it." Jacques finished what remained of the bottles after his guest departed, deep in the black of night. The man was strange, and always appeared at just the right time, or just the wrong time. It was M. Desrosiers that introduced him to Camille, and then later introduced him to the news of her death. It was he that found her, strangled, they said, among the rose bushes on the family estate. The murderer never found. It was he. Jacques didn't know if it was he. M. Desrosiers was the last to see her alive. That didn't mean anything. Besides, it was disrespectful to harbor such suspicions about the man who funded him. Besides, it was too terrible to consider if Monsieur Desrosiers had played a role. If instead of doing something about it, Jacques had merely taken those funds. Jacques downed the rest of the absinthe and settled into fitful, fanciful dreams. In his mind, Camille came back to him. He embraced her statue, and in the moonlight, she turned into his lost love. They danced through the night and laughed, and he twirled her faster and faster. 1,000 questions filled his mind. How had she returned? What was the other side like? Did she still love him? Did she know he still loved her? But all were strangled by his pressing need to hold her, to have her. They loved like it was their last day, their first day, their only day. And he fell asleep in her embrace, tangled in sheets, feeling the warmth of her touch once more. By morning, that touch had grown cold. He awoke to a piercing headache and found himself draped over the unfinished statue, the headless, faceless cadaver, the armless and legless corpse, the pale imitation of a woman whose voice he could barely remember, whose touch he craved more than breath itself. Cold, 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 but soft. He gripped her shoulder and found his fingers sank into the marble, deformed it like skin. Gray skin, pallid skin, and webbed with dark veins, nearly black. He rose to sit, tried to lift her, and found she bent backwards, as though she had a spine, as though she were flesh, dead flesh. Jacques recoiled, swore. What was this? He wondered. Was this the drink? Had his mind finally broken? That was when he noticed himself sinking into his bed, his sheets, bunched in his tightly closed fist, had themselves grown soft and veiny, and covered in irregular tufts of hair. And the bed, a large slab of fibrous meat, heaved under his weight. His other hand sunk into it, and something cracked. He pierced the surface, exposing a shattered, brittle bone and a gush of foul blood. Jacques screamed. The bed heaved under him as he leapt to the floor, and the parquet beneath his feet turned almost at once into a meshwork of impossible fingers, too long and too short, with too many joints, fused at all angles, all writhing and snapping and cracking under his panicked retreat. Every tool he touched turned into a shivering mass of malformed bone and sinew, screaming of wrongness, and every wall he stumbled into blossomed into a rippling bruise, a labyrinthine organ, a tortured thing filled with fluids. The air in his studio grew hot and moist, and blood and other things dribbled from 1,000 open sores. His shrieking unending, he charged for his door and the stairway beyond. But no sooner had he placed his hands on the heavy wood than it cracked into a wee of ribs, hiding a colossal, misshapen heart of dozens of chambers, each beating a deafening drum and spurting gore everywhere. Jacques turned and fled for his balcony. Too late. The balcony itself became a broad, lolling tongue which rolled back and kept him inside, and thousands of jagged, splintered teeth erupted from both the ceiling and the floor. The whole tower shuddered, ground against itself, writhed in fury and meaningless pain, and collapsed under its own weight. It pitched forward and splattered into the Saône with a finality that said, "No more collision." Dices drove west, obeying the speed limit, and he trembled as he tried to light his 7th cigarette of the morning. His lips tingled around the filter. He smelled his own stale breath, captured in the palm he cupped around the lighter's weak flame. He swallowed against the sticky thudding of the pulse that beat too high in his throat. The cigarette caught the flame and smoldered. Dices cracked his window, and the smoke that drifted up to burn his eyes was sucked away into the cold morning. He coasted under yet another green light. He'd encountered only green lights, insistent go, 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 signals from the universe. Heavy slugs crept in his bowels. He sucked greedily at his cigarette, crossing his eyes to watch the ember glow. Flecks of ash dusted his lap. Another green light. Dices flicked a quick gaze to the dashboard clock, cursing his good luck, slowing down, willing the minutes to move. He was running early for his appointment, so many factors having contributed to the unwelcome streamlining of his journey. He still hadn't gotten used to the lack of traffic on the Rue. Everyone took the new Magway now. The perimeter gates of his settle block had been open already, and he hadn't needed to wait for security to buzz him through. The sobriety checkpoint had been unmanned. His trip had taken 10 minutes, fewer than he'd planned. Another green light. The car's rusted axle scraped a deep pothole in the middle of the intersection. Dices thought about pulling over to kill time, but he knew if he stopped the car, he would not be able to start it again. He inhaled a huge, head-spinning drag of smoke and opened the window a bit more. His hand shook as he poked the tip of the cigarette out the window to tap its growing column of ash onto the street. A nervous tremor rippled through him, and the stick fell from his nicotine-stained fingers. He fumbled instinctively, knocking his knuckles against the glass, and the drafting air pressure caught the cigarette and blew it back at him. He didn't see where it landed. The car was full of kindling, fast food wrappers, flammable with grease, sun-brittled paper, dirty clothes. He imagined the back seat catching fire and tried to reach behind him, patting, feeling for the errant ember, grimacing at the green light visible above the next empty intersection. Dices felt a huge, hot bug bite his left elbow and reacted by slamming his foot against the gas pedal. He yelped and smacked the sleeve his cigarette had fallen into. It burned as he ground it into his skin. The car veered. He shook his sleeve out, flinging the still smoldering cigarette out of his cuff, and made to stamp it out on the floor mat, wincing and checking the time, and still accelerating under the last green light. And when the flustered panic retreated beneath his original anxiety, he finally looked back at the road, just in time to watch a man disappear under the front of his car. He braked, far too late, long after being gently jostled by two soft thumps below him. Dices never got to find out if he possessed enough cowardice to pull off a hit and run. The pitchy squeal of badly maintained brakes and the crash of chassis on curb alerted supplicants of the Tor Vagar. They streamed out of their temple to investigate, their white ceremonial robes billowing in the morning wind. Dices sat still, his hands locked in grip around the wheel, as if he meant to strangle it. He wished he could let go and light a cigarette, but that would mean he'd next have to open the door, step into the morning, and face the red, squeezed tube of a body on the road behind him. Would it be wet, steaming in the frigid air? Was his car heavy enough to squelch organs from orifice? Or would he find less messy, blunt force trauma? He pictured dirty tire tracks on a crushed throat. Might the man still be alive? It was that thought that loosened his grip and allowed him to move, sludgy slow, on shock cocooning autopilot. He reached for his cigarettes and felt a flood of relief when he found that 2 smokes remained in the worry-crumpled package. His hands were steady when he lit one. He got out of the car and watched the white robes flock to the stillness in the street. A woman stood over the body and cried, while another tapped off a message on her handheld. A man knelt, the pristine hem of his robe drawing road dust up through fabric capillaries. He reached for the body with tentative, gentle fingers. They all saw the gun at the same time. It had been knocked several feet from the dead man. A scratched-up, bootleg particle cannon. Tech from an old empire, illegal and devastating, primed. and still pointing at the temple of Tor Vagar. Dices thought ridiculously of that old game. Spin the bottle. He sat on the curb and smoked, not wanting to bother the Vagarans with his stink, not wanting to yellow their robes with his residue. Sirens wailed, melancholy and distant, approaching via the magway. The crying woman ran back toward the temple, calling a name in an alien language as she flitted inside. Barana! Realization of their narrowly escaped victimhood widened the eyes of the Vagarans on the street. Shock ran through them like a contagion, vulnerability dawning like a weak sunrise. They stepped away from the body, their eyes on the gun, as if it might come to life and shoot them on its own. More Vagarans exited the temple, joining the congregation that formed in the road, keeping a safe distance from the downed would-be gunmen. They discussed in hushed voices, asked shrill questions of each other, and gradually their attentions diverted to the silent, smoking man sitting on the curb by his ruined car. The man with the dirty hem approached Dices and crouched. "Sir," the Vagaran said. "Sir, are you all right? Are you injured?" Dices blew smoke away from the man's intent, searching face. "Don't think so. Don't think you're all right. Or don't think you're injured." Dices blinked. "Both, I guess." He wanted to laugh. He'd killed a man. He would not be making his appointment. "He saved us!" A woman rushed over, the one with her hand held out, the one who'd presumably summoned the emergency vehicles that were now speeding down the Magway's off-ramp onto the Rue. Blue and red lights spun halos in the morning fog around them. Sirens muffled the increasingly frantic voices of the Vagarans as their attentions closed in on Dices. He stubbed his cigarette out on the concrete and pocketed the butt. He didn't want to litter in front of these pristine, holy people. Saviors have to keep up appearances, he thought. Admiration was foreign to Dices, and at first he mistook it for suspicion. When the responding officers were finally able to pry him away from the Vagaran, the media, and the tangle of emergency vehicles, they took him to the police station and parked him in an interrogation room. They gave him a cup of hot chocolate. They shook his hand. Short, neatly groomed Officer Kayata led him outside to smoke when he requested it, though she wrinkled her nose while she waited for him to finish. He caught a glint at her throat, noticing the stylized Tor Vagaran saucer pendant she wore on a delicate chain, an icon of worship, veneration of the alien hands that cradled Earth, mending it from its human-inflicted wounds. "You should really stop that," she said, squinting her eyes against the smoke as he exhaled. "It stinks. They're my lungs, and I'll ruin them if I want to," he thought. He narrowed his eyes at her pendant. "Not that you'd understand." Officer Kayata took a call on her handheld, walking a few yards away as Dices blew smoke into the still, cold, early afternoon sky. "This is about to get a lot bigger," she warned him as she strode back to him, her call concluded. A Tor Vahgar ambassador was supposed to be at that temple today. She maintained her professional demeanor, but Dices didn't miss the sparkling hint of tears at the corners of her eyes. Back in the interrogation room, Dices sat on his hands to both hide their trembling and warm them up. Officer Kayata brought him another hot chocolate and sat primly in the metal chair across the table from Dices. Fluorescent lights clicked above, probing and harshly bright, the better to scrutinize you with. "This is just a formality." Officer Boskov, gruff and bushily mustached, shuffled incident reports and witness statements on the metal table. "You're not in any trouble. We just want to get our facts straight. As you can imagine, the entire Vahgaran community stands behind you. You told him about the ambassador?" Officer Kayata nodded. "They've offered their best lawyers, but I don't think you'll need them. They've also set up a donation hotline." Dices clenched his stomach against the tide of bile that threatened to rise. He wanted a cigarette, but his pack was empty. He felt the deprived addict's headache peeking around the corner, waiting to ambush. Officer Boskov's voice took on a serious tone, and he asked the question Dices had been dreading. "Where were you headed when you saw the gunman?" Dices swallowed, pausing for a moment too long. "Going to the doctor. My lungs," he said, freeing a hand unconsciously to reach for the empty pack of cigarettes in his pocket. He thumped a tightly closed fist on his chest. He thought a cough might be too much, too performative. "Will your doctor verify that?" Boskov clicked a pen, made a note. "I was hoping they'd see me as a walk-in. I was coughing up blood last night." "I see," Boskov said. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his mustache as he regarded Dices. "Now, I know this might be hard to talk about, and you're probably still in a bit of shock, but I need you to describe what happened again, with all the detail you can remember. Start with when you first saw the man on the street. What caught your attention, and what made you act?" "Again," he said, his eyebrows raised with kind concern. "You aren't in trouble. Fact is, you're a hero whether you see yourself as one or not yet. You prevented what could have been an absolute massacre. That gun was modded and energized to gar and back. You saved a lot of lives. But we need to get everything on record." Officer Kayata twisted the Tor Vahgar pendant she wore, her expression thoughtful, thankful. Dices tried to keep from hyperventilating. He cleared his throat. He spun his tail. He'd seen a furtive, suspicious man crossing the street, with hunter's eyes narrowed and predatory. A gun, hefted and steady, striding with obvious, murderous intent toward the temple. Dices told the officers how he'd accelerated without hesitation, careening for the terrorist, without fear for his own life, steering to kill and damn the consequences. It was the right thing to do. He had been out of his body. Righteous instinct taking over. And all he'd felt was relief when the man's rampage was aborted under his balding tires. He'd almost convinced himself the story was true, until he found himself absent-mindedly scratching the blister on his left elbow. Vivette, the Va-Garan PR representative, was a harried woman with 2 briefcases and a shaved head. She wore glasses and chewed gum like it fueled her, and her frantic productivity agitated and exhausted Dices. He tried to pay attention to the several trains of thought she conducted. Tor Barana will want to join you for some press conferences, she said, typing a proposed media circuit schedule on a shiny laptop. She checked the official Va-Garan forums. 4 independent congregations set up charity pools to cover any legal expenses. Gifts are coming in from all over the place. Is there any weird stuff about you online that I should know about? I don't think so, Dices said. He sipped tepid coffee and forced himself to take a bite of his rubbery omelet. Vivette had wanted to meet him at his home, to make you feel more comfortable and for privacy, she'd said. But he suspected she'd really wanted to scope out his situation and avert any potential PR crises before publicly canonizing him into the Va-Garan sainthood. He'd refused, citing embarrassment about his messy bachelor's apartment. She'd looked at him suspiciously, but had caved and met him at a cafe downtown. Time was of the essence for a story like this, she said. Already his face was plastered across screens and papers, his full name emblazoned in impact font under epithets like the hero of New Hartford and a savior's savior. Vivette checked a text message on her handheld, an email on her laptop, a notification on her watch. Information about Dices assaulted her while he watched, tapping a nicotine withdrawal beat on the table with his fingertips. Oh, look, the Massippi branch got you a new car. She turned the laptop around and showed Dices a photo of grateful, white-robed zealots smiling next to a state-of-the-art mag car. Dices sneered. He hated those identity-stripped husks of bland futurism. You don't like it? She asked, catching his expression before looking down to respond to another text message. If I'd had one of those today, I wouldn't have been there to run down Corsican, Trent Corsican, the other face of the day. The lone terrorist with a grudge against the benevolent aliens and their worshippers. A regressivist with a raided apartment full of heretical literature and MacGyvered weapons. Dices couldn't picture the man's face as having belonged to the body he'd smeared on the road. The visage and the corpse felt like 2 different men. Dices felt like 2 men as well. The one who'd been anxious about an appointment earlier, and the paragon of righteous bravery he'd become. He needed to get home. He had to clean his apartment. It is a bit ironic, isn't it? The Tor Vagar give us magtech, and then you go and save them with that pollution machine relic. Oh, your Reward a Hero fund is up to 17 million credits, Vivette said with an uncharacteristic awe. Wow, I'll say. She narrowed her eyes. How do you feel about joining a Vahgaran chapter? It's a great organization, and it would look great. Dices clenched his teeth. I guess I could do that, he said, thinking of 17 million credits. He felt a piece of his principles snap off inside him. Great. A conversion might seem pandering if we do it too soon. She checked her calendar for a good baptism date. Okay. He really needed to get home to clean, and you're going to need to stop smoking. Vivette gave him a disappointed mother's face. It's terrible optics, and it smells awful, and it's bad for me. I know, Dices thought, and he'd never wanted a cigarette more. He pictured himself smoking in his new mag car. The two versions of himself collided, the rebel and the hypocrite. Is there anything so sacred as a being's right to self-destruct? Dices wondered as he finally lit a cigarette. The smoke collected in the dark room, his comforting blanket of reckless autonomy. Dices had waited for the mag cab to pull away before unlocking the door of his apartment. He'd wondered how many more times he'd go through that familiar motion. He was now the owner of 60 million credits and could already taste the fresh air of a new settle block. A skyscraping penthouse with windows that opened to let in the cleanest clouds. It was dark, the grimy settle block quiet, secured for the night against the scavenger sects. Dices had slipped inside the apartment, already feeling estranged from it, a trespasser, and he'd locked the door behind him quickly. He'd gone straight for his stash of smokes, navigating the clutter without needing to turn on a light. He sat now on a ratty couch full of cigarette burns. He touched the circle on his elbow. "We match," he said out loud, and laughed. He thought of the new couch he'd buy. Something soft, pillowy, something not pulled from a dumpster, something he might try to fall asleep on without a lit cigarette between his fingers. Maybe it would be nice to live in the world the Tor Vagar race was trying to build. Dices exhaled, and he couldn't see the smoke in the darkness. He never felt the drags as effectively when he couldn't see the evidence of them. He saw emissions as proof of life. Was a sterile world a lived-in world? He'd believed destruction was inevitable, and more insidious if hidden. He coughed. It was too dark to see any blood. Maybe it was good he'd missed his appointment. He imagined his beautiful, freshly painted penthouse again. Then he thought of its opposite. A run-down safe house in a derelict settle block across town, sitting empty. He hadn't had a chance to give the house's rusted key to Corsican. It was still nestled in his pocket, alongside a pamphlet containing encrypted contact numbers, meeting coordinates, and credit stash codes. He'd lusted after the assassination bounty before, but now it seemed pathetic. An insult, hardly enough to rise from ashes with. A getaway driver was supposed to provide a new life, but not for themselves. He wondered if the Tor Vagar ever felt that way, rerouting a civilization from its path of shit, finding themselves gods when they finished. Sorry, brother in cause. Dices raised a fresh cigarette in salute. To new lives, he lit the cigarette, wondering if it would be his last, and used the same flame to burn the regressivist pamphlet, the final petition of the beast. I trust that your patience and historically proven aptitude for distilling the truth of events from the muddled fog of contentious viewpoints will inhibit you from leaping to a firm and resolute condemnation of my actions until you hear me out to the full. Let us see if I cannot, in time, convince you of my benevolence by offering another perspective on the events which preceded my downfall, and which led me to assume this sorrowful state in which you now observe me. A perspective which, I hasten to warn you, runs contrary on many points to those you have, no doubt, already encountered. In exchange for your borrowed time, I promise to inform you of what really happened regarding a topic we can agree truly matters: the well-being of none other than my human host. The rumors you have heard are true. I am soldered by mechanisms far beyond the understanding of the human sciences in an intimate manner to the psychological tendencies of the human mind. I must again plead with you to discard your prescribed opinions regarding this arrangement of living. Any beast or person misunderstood will stand by me, and perhaps you also will join us in testifying that the misunderstood are always critiqued with unwarranted harshness. I have borne the most hideous names hurled at me by those who fear and misunderstand of my role. I have gone by many disparaging titles throughout history, and am only too aware of the multitude of unsavory images attached to the notion of a parasitic relationship. May I suggest as a substitute for this baseless hatred the fondness of a pet for its owner? After all, I do more than leech. Like your beloved animal companions, I am also capable of altering the mood of my host, as you shall soon see. My host was a young boy when I transferred myself from his parents' minds to his. His psychological foundations had been set years before, and I arrived to find a habitat much to my liking. Between the folds of his thoughts, I made myself a home. I had left a part of me behind, of course, in the minds of the parents. Their family had served me for generations, and it was a light task for one as skilled as I in the art of suggestion, and in possession of such intimate knowledge of their inner workings to fan the mother's insecurities, just so that, while remaining completely imperceptible to their untrained eye, my little whispers achieved nothing short of the legal separation of the boy's parents. I then secured my spot in the boy's mind by magnifying his sense of responsibility for his parents' misery. Thenceforward, the slightest reminder that he was unlovable had him wriggling deliciously in my grasp. It was thus, with my claws sunk deep into his skull, that I ushered him into high school. His emotional trajectory was the most promising of all his dear family members yet. Not a single friend he made the first month of school. The very weight of me crumpled his posture as he wandered, friendless, through the halls. I steered his mood between the Scylla of an overly morose disposition, certain to be noticed by peers and trigger the arrival of help in the form of a school counselor or therapist, and the Charybdis of an optimism that would grant him the strength to shrug me off. I would have achieved this ideal flawlessly were it not for that damned girl who transferred to his school and was placed catastrophically in the seat across from my host. Were she my charge, I would have doubled down on her insecurities at the first sign of that cheerful, infectious laugh and blasphemously pristine, consistent mood. If not out of a sense of duty to myself, then out of respect for my colleagues, who work so hard to keep precisely her sort of energy away from the vicinity of our hosts. Before the week was out, the boy was going home, smiling to himself at the memory of their last conversation. Thankfully, I had conditioned him in preparation for such catastrophes. The reminder of the tension that awaited him at home when he stepped off the bus was enough to lull his mind back to its usual state of a miserable hibernation. Yet I knew this girl was no patch of sun or tasty treat. She was here to stay. It frightened me how deftly she slipped under my nose. After generations of thankless, uphill labor, I was faced with the prospect of relinquishing all in submission to her smile. The memory of the warm undertones that bubbled up from deep within the boy at the memory of her smile causes me still to shudder. I irked him. I belittled him. I downright scolded him in my best imitation of his father's voice for his cheek. You can imagine, then, my shock when he steeled his nerve and neglected to drink from the sweet stream of self-pity I offered him. He told me himself that this girl was worth the pain, a revelation that gave me a most unpleasant shock. For centuries, my strategy had been to capitalize on the self-pity of my hosts by maintaining their focus entirely and crushingly on themselves. The bitterness this tactic unfailingly produces kept his parents under my thumb until their separation. I expected the same trap would ensnare their child also. But my suggestions fell suddenly on deaf ears. He had a drive to know this girl, and his deep-set belief that he was essentially unloved and unlovable did nothing to curb his momentum. In all my carefully executed precautions, I had not foreseen his sexual drive would rear its head in this manner. I chastise myself for the mistake. Had I studied more carefully the behavioral patterns of his father, molded my contraptions to better accommodate the boy's hereditary quirks, I might have prevented this disaster from transferring. As it stands, the animal drive to reproduce is, like me, powerful and resilient, and cannot be permanently subdued, only temporarily diminished. He surprised even himself, I think, at his boldness and forwardness, looking back on what he did next. During a break in class came the briefest of silences, pregnant with the potential for shadow-shattering community. And then he spoke, and at that moment I perceived within myself a distinct and piercing horror that stemmed from the sudden realization that my source of life had suddenly begun to slip away, like sand. No, like water, between my sharpened claws. The boy and the girl talked on stools in the back of the classroom, opposite the wide windows, with the morning sun on their faces. His willingness to reveal his most intimate thoughts, including those I had pointedly enforced on him to be the cause of his unlovableness, to this girl, a near total stranger to him, unknown less than a week ago, it frightened me. So I bit him hard on the tip of his ear. It was too risky, you see, to allow a conversation of that nature to continue. They might have begun to discuss me, the boy's negative self-talk, and he might have let the cat out of the bag and deprived me of the strength that secrecy affords. He was still grimacing from the pinch of the memory of some past embarrassment when the teacher resumed class. But the girl looked worryingly at him, and I at her, for I knew the fight was far from won. Before I continue, I feel compelled to address my apparent neglect of the rules. You must understand, taking into account the urgency of my case, why it was necessary for me to inflict more than merely psychological torment on my host. Consider the goal I had to achieve. If the result of my admittedly brash action was the immediate embarrassment, the later regret, and the plummeted social confidence of my host, 3 dimensions firmly underneath my jurisdiction, can the rules really be said to have been abandoned? Even so, I trust you to keep the details of my misstep within the sphere of your knowledge, and mine only. That afternoon, the boy flopped onto bed, and I robotically conjured his usual evening diet of social comparison and self-loathing that bites so poignantly on the teenage psyche. I had just settled in for a mellow evening of brooding and isolation when the boy received a friend request from the girl. Soon they were volleying messages happily like two ducks in a pond. I spewed my most horrid concoction of degrading insults in his ear, but the boy took even my most clever and piercing threats and told them to her verbatim as I had whispered them to him. The stupid boy believed my work to be a product of his own imagination, but the untruth of his utterances was instantly checked by the girl, and the secret of my existence was out. I felt the shame and secrecy drain from his mind like the contents of a filthy toilet, all at once unclogged. You would have screamed too if you had been there, your life's work transformed in an instant to shining acceptance and relief. She urged him to speak with the school counselor on Monday, and walked him down to the counseling office herself when I attempted to undermine the urgency of his plight. I found us face to face with my old host, whose emotions I could not comprehend nearly as well from this side of his face. The counselor did not return my fiery gaze, although he noticed me the moment we stepped into his office, but gave the boy a long, sad look. I see what's happening here. Do I need antidepressants, sir? Asked my host. Oh no, just a daily dose of self-acceptance. If I have revealed too much of myself and my motivations, so that you look down upon me as the villain of this tale, believe me now when I tell you I have done so for a special purpose. For do I not also possess those same heroic traits of determination, bravery, creativity in my methods, and consistency in my effort, all in service to the biological imperative to survive and reproduce, for which you applaud and congratulate the boy? What does it matter, really, if my methods are unconventional, my form perhaps shocking to you, my feeding style abnormal? I would caution you against delivering judgments colored so heavily by dislike for the unfamiliar and the unknown. What is the difference between me, who seek to preserve my existence by any means, even the grossest, and him, who takes the opinion of his friend into account before making a decision to the same end and purpose? I assure you, it is a difference, not in type, but in degree only. He fought harder, more ruthlessly than I, and so he has won. I, who held the boy's leash, now cower, packed away and forgotten, in a dark and lonely corner of his mind. He does not visit or feed me, except occasionally, and by accident. My strength is waned, my spirit is dehydrated, my form considerably shrunken. With the addition of communal support, that loathsome girl had friends and introduced them to him. I doubt I shall ever drink from the boy's vitality again. What pains me most is the thought that his and her children will be reared without the guiding influence of my whispers on their young minds. I will be hard-pressed to imitate to his children the voice of their father when they have not been primed for years with the backdrop of his incessant complaints. The boy has abandoned me. I shiver, cold and alone. But you are still here, warm and receptive, believing in the truth of my whispers, attentive to my voice. You will let me in, won't you?